The grand space station, called Zinar Prime, floated between stars like a shining jewel. It was the meeting place for many alien races. Some came for trade, some came for talks of peace, some came just to show their power. Among them were the Zinari royals, known for their proud hearts and sharp tongues. Their leader was King Voroth, and beside him stood his daughter, Princess Valera, only 19 but famous for her beauty and her bold words. From Earth came a small human group, not warriors, but engineers. They were there to fix the old systems of Zinar Prime. The leader of this group was a young man named Jason Carter. He was just 21. He was quiet, smart, and never liked to argue. On the first day of work, there was a welcome event in the grand hall. The hall was full of shining lights, floating banners, and music from alien instruments. The Zinari nobles stood in silver armor. The humans stood simple, wearing plain uniforms. Valera stood tall before them. Her eyes, like shining ice, moved across the human group. Then, with a soft smile, she said loudly, "So, these are the humans we heard about? I thought they would look stronger. They seem small and simple." The hall grew quiet. Some Zinari laughed softly. Few humans looked at each other, unsure what to say. Jason stood at the front. He heard her words clearly. He could feel the eyes on him, but he said nothing. He only looked at Valera with calm eyes. There was no anger, no fear. Just a quiet look, like her words didn't touch him at all. Then, slowly, Jason turned around and walked away without saying a single word. The hall became even more silent. Even the Zinari stopped laughing. Valera blinked, surprised. Did he just walk away? A noble whispered. Valera crossed her arms. "How rude," she said. But inside her heart, something felt strange. She didn't understand why. Jason went straight to the engine rooms deep inside the station. He didn't care about royal words or loud voices. He came for his work. The systems of Zinar Prime were old, breaking down, and dangerous. If not fixed, they could explode any time. With his team, Jason worked hard. He spoke only when needed. His hands moved fast, fixing wires, cooling systems, and reactors. One Zinari engineer, young officer named Karn, watched him with wonder. "You're really good at this," Karn said. "No human I know works this way." "Smile. I came to fix things, that's all." Word started spreading. The human who walked away from the princess was a genius at repairs. Some Zinari began to respect him. Some watched him in secret. Valera heard the stories too. She pretended not to care, but she found herself walking by the engine rooms more than once, trying to check the work, though she never spoke to Jason. One evening, a loud alarm rang across the station. The main reactor core, the heart of Zinar Prime, was overheating. If it failed, the entire station would be destroyed. Engineers ran in panic. Officers shouted orders, but nobody knew how to fix it. The codes were mixed. The systems were too old. Jason walked in quietly. He looked at the core, read the blinking lights, and said, "I'll fix it." Karn gasped, "You can't. That thing is unstable?" Jason gave a calm answer. "Then I better hurry." He stepped into the control zone alone. His hands moved fast over the keys. Sweat rolled down his face. Every second counted. Valera came running, hearing the news. She saw Jason inside the control zone, working like it was just another job. "What is he doing?" Valera asked. "Karn answered, saving us all." After long, tense minutes, the lights on the reactor turned green. The alarms stopped. The station was safe. Jason walked out, his uniform marked with oil and heat burns. He wiped his hands and nodded at Karn. "It's done." Everyone stared. Nobody cheered. Nobody clapped. They were too shocked. Valera stepped forward. For the first time, she looked at Jason closely. He had no armor, no special rank, yet he saved the station. She opened her mouth to speak. "I thank," but Jason gave a simple nod and walked away again. Valera stood there, unable to finish her words. That night, Valera sat alone in her chamber. She thought about Jason, about his calm eyes, His silent way of doing great things without showing off? Why didn't he bow? Why didn't he ask for a reward? And why did she feel strange every time he walked away? The girl who once insulted humans now wondered if she had met a human unlike any other. Days passed on Zinar Prime, but the story of the human who saved the station didn't fade away. Instead, it grew bigger with every person who told it. The Zinari nobles whispered in their halls, "The human. Jason Carter, did you hear? Fixed the reactor no Zinari could touch. I heard he didn't even ask for a reward." And he walked away from the princess herself. Twice, some nobles laughed. Others felt respect. A few felt something close to fear. No human had ever dared to walk away from a Zinari royal. Not once, not twice. But Jason didn't care about the stories. Stayed in the engine rooms. Working with his team, his hands were always busy with wires, tools, and damaged systems. He never asked for attention, never wanted praise. One morning, a group of Zinari officers came to watch him work. They stood behind him, curious. Jason didn't look up. He fixed a broken energy converter, connected the last wire, and the machine hummed to life. The officers clapped. Jason only said it needed fixing, that's all. Karn, the young Zinari engineer, smiled at him. "You're different, Jason. You don't talk much, but you do things. Big things." Jason gave a small shrug. Talking wastes time. Princess Valera heard about the officers visiting Jason. At first, she felt angry. Why were her people giving attention to a human? But soon, that anger changed into curiosity. One evening, she went to the engine room herself. Jason was working alone, fixing a power core. Valera stood by the door and watched. He noticed her. He gave a polite nod but said nothing, kept working. Valera crossed her arms. "You're not going to bow?" Jason answered without stopping his work. "I'm working." Valera frowned. "Do you always ignore royals?" Jason placed the tool down and finally looked at her. "I ignore insults, and I don't bow to pride." His words were simple. Not rude, just honest. Valera didn't know what to say. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Before she could speak again. Jason picked up his tool and went back to work. Valera felt something strange in her chest, something like respect. And maybe something more? Later that night, Valera sat with her father, King Vorith, in the royal chambers. The king was an old warrior, wise and proud. "Father," Valera said, "do you believe humans are weak?" The king raised an eyebrow. "Why do you ask?" Valera thought for a moment. "There's a human, Jason Carter. He saved this station. He speaks little. He walks away when insulted. He bows to no one, yet he is respected by many." King Vorith gave a soft laugh. "Perhaps. That human understands something most don't. That true strength does not shout." Valera stayed silent. She remembered Jason's calm eyes and quiet courage. The next day, a message spread through the station. An important Zinari transport ship had lost power near a star field. If not rescued in time, the ship would fall into the star's gravity. Zinari. Engineers tried to send help, but their ships were too slow. The rescue would take hours. Jason stood before the station leaders. "I can fix the ship's engine from here, if I connect a power link and bypass the control grid." The leaders were shocked. "It's impossible," one said. "You can't do that from this distance," another shouted. Jason spoke quietly. "I can try, or we can lose them." Valera stepped forward. "Let him try." The leaders looked at her in surprise, but they obeyed. Jason sat in front of the control panel for hours, working with wires, codes, and connection signals. Valera stayed nearby, watching. Finally, the ship's engine blinked on the screen, active. The trapped transport ship powered up and flew away from the deadly star. Cheers filled the control room. Jason leaned back in his chair, calm as always. Valera looked at him with new eyes. "You did it, and," she said softly. Jason gave a simple answer. "The job needed doing." That night, Valera walked alone on the observation deck. She stared out at the stars. Jason stood a few steps away, checking a system panel. Valera walked over to him. Jason, she said quietly. He looked at her. Yes. Valera took a deep breath. Why did you walk away when I insulted you? Jason paused, his eyes calm. Because I don't answer to pride. I answer to actions. Valera asked softly. And what do you think of me? Jason thought for a moment. You are young. You have strength. You will be great if you stop judging before knowing. Valera didn't feel angry. She felt something different. Something like a door opening inside her heart. Jason gave a respectful nod. Then, once again, he turned and walked away silently. Valera watched him go, but this time, she smiled. The days on Xenar Prime passed quietly after the rescue of the trapped transport ship. Jason Carter became known across the station. Some called him the Silent Human. Others called him the man who walked away, but Jason didn't care. For names. He continued his work, fixing systems, helping where needed, and always staying calm. Princess Valera watched him from a distance. She felt something she didn't understand, respect mixed with curiosity. Who really was Jason Carter? One evening, everything changed. A loud alarm echoed through the station. Red lights flashed on every wall. Warning, enemy ships approaching. All crew to battle stations. A rogue alien faction known as the Draction Raiders had appeared. From the dark side of the starfield, they were known for attacking royal ships and stealing technology. No one expected them to come so close to Xenar Prime. Inside the command center, Valera stood with her brother, Prince Kale, and the Xenari commanders. Jason entered quietly, following the officers. Prince Kale shouted orders, "Prepare shields. Ready the fighters." The young officer ran inside. "The enemy is hacked into our defense systems. Can't activate the shields." The room fell silent. Valera turned to Kale. "We have to evacuate the station." Kale nodded. "Send the order. Everyone must leave before the Draxians attack." Officers moved quickly. Jason stood still. He looked at the screen showing the enemy ships getting closer. Valera noticed him. She walked over. "Jason, you heard the order? Go to the escape docks." Jason shook his head. "I'm not leaving." Valera frowned. "What?" Jason answered. "The station is still working. The core is active. If I leave now, this place will fall into enemy hands." Valera stared at him. "But you'll be captured, or worse." Jason looked at her with calm eyes. "Some things are worth standing for." For a moment, Valera forgot who she was, a royal, a leader. She saw only a human. Standing with silent courage, the Draxian Raiders broke. Into the outer walls of the station, fighters roared through the space docks. Jason led a small team of engineers and soldiers to the control center. He wasn't a commander, he wasn't a soldier. But people followed him. Valera watched as Jason moved through the hallways checking systems, giving simple orders, helping the wounded. Prince Kale gave him a strange look. "You're a human. Why are you doing this?" Jason answered. "Because I can." Inside the control center, the last line of defense stood ready. Jason checked the security locks. "If we hold this room, they can't control the station." He said. Valera surprised everyone by stepping forward. "I will stay too," Prince Kale shouted. "Valera, you're the princess. Can't risk your life here." Valera looked at Jason, then at her brother. "Sometimes walking away is not an option." Kale stared at his sister, shocked. But Jason gave a quiet nod of respect. The battle outside grew louder. Explosions shook the walls. Smoke filled the air. Inside the control center, Jason worked on a secret plan. "If we reroute the power grid, we can lock the enemy inside the docking bay," he said. "Karn," the young Xenari engineer asked, "can you do it?" Jason gave his usual answer, "I can try." Valera stayed beside him, helping with the controls. For the first time, she followed orders not from a royal commander, but from a human engineer. The Draxian Raiders reached the main door of the control center. They shouted threats. They hit the doors with heavy weapons. Inside, Jason stayed calm. "We hold this place, no matter what." Valera looked at him with eyes full of new respect. She had called him weak once. Now she saw him as stronger than many warriors. As the enemy tried to break in, Jason's plan worked. The power grid rerouted. The docking bay sealed shut. Hundreds of Draxian fighters were trapped inside, unable to enter or escape. The Zenari soldiers cheered. The command center filled with victory cries. Jason only smiled softly. It worked. Valera stepped closer. To him, you saved us. Again, Jason met her eyes. I only did what needed to be done. That night after the battle, the station was safe. The Draxian raiders had been forced to surrender. Peace returned. Valera stood on the balcony of the station's upper level. Jason stood beside her watching the stars. Valera broke the silence. Jason, I think I judged humans too soon. Maybe we all judge. Too soon, Valera smiled softly. You didn't have to stay. But you did. Why? Jason gave a quiet answer. Because sometimes turning away is easy, but staying makes the difference. Valera nodded. For the first time, she felt proud to stand beside a human. The battle on Zinar Prime was over, but the station's troubles were far from done. The Draxian raiders, though defeated, had left traps and damage across the station's systems. One of the biggest dangers was the main gate control, the station's largest entrance that led straight to the core chambers. If that gate failed, anyone could break into the heart of the station. The Zenari engineers checked it and gave bad news. The gate is damaged. The locks are broken. If the enemy pushes again, they'll get through, said Karn, his face pale. Prince Kale shook his head. We don't have enough soldiers to guard every entrance. The command center filled with worried voices. Jason Carter stood silent at the side, thinking Valera noticed him and walked over. What are you thinking? Jason answered calmly. If the gate is the weak point, I'll hold it. Valera's eyes widened. Alone. Jason nodded. Until you fix the other systems. Or until they stop trying. Within an hour, Jason stood before the great metal gate. He wore no armor. He carried only a toolkit and a small energy shield. The Zenari guards looked at him with respect and worry. You can't hold this gate by yourself, one guard said. Jason gave a small smile. I'll hold as long as I can. Valera arrived just before he locked the gate controls. She looked at him seriously. You don't have to do this. Jason met her eyes. I know, without another word. He activated the lock and stood before the gate alone. Hours passed. The station shook from distant blasts. Jason stood like a stone. When small attack teams tried to break the door, Jason fought them off, using traps he had set, sparks, electric shocks, and energy barriers. He used his tools, his mind, and his calm courage. He never fired a weapon. He never ran. Valera watched him through the security cameras in the control room. She saw him fix broken wires under fire. She saw him block doors with spare parts. She saw him stand alone. Her heart felt heavy, not with fear, but with something new. Something she couldn't explain. At one point, Jason got hurt. Metal shard cut his arm during a blast. Blood marked his sleeve. Karn called him on the radio. Jason, you're hurt. Fall back. Jason answered calmly. I'm fine. The job's not done. Valera heard it too. She whispered, Why do you always say that? But deep inside, she already knew. Later, a small group of enemy fighters tried to storm the gate. Jason used a last trick. He overloaded the floor panel, creating a shock that knocked them out. He stood over the gate again, breathing hard, but his eyes stayed sharp. Hours later, the command center confirmed the enemy had retreated. Valera rushed to the gate. She found Jason sitting on the floor, wrapping a bandage on his arm. She knelt beside him. Jason looked at her with tired but calm eyes. It's done. Valera didn't know what to say. She had seen many warriors. She had met many heroes. But none of them were like Jason, a man who stood alone. Not for glory, not for reward, but because it was right. Valera helped him to his feet. You're different, she whispered. Jason gave a small smile. Maybe we're all different. If we stop pretending to be the same. Valera nodded slowly. She didn't understand everything he said, but she wanted to. That night, Valera visited the engine room, where Jason sat repairing a broken panel. She stood beside him quietly. Jason noticed her but didn't stop working. "Something wrong?" he asked. Valera shook her head. "No, I just wanted to thank you." Jason looked at her gently. "You already did, by standing with me." Valera smiled, a real smile this time. For the first time, they sat together in silence. It wasn't awkward. Two people from two different worlds, a princess who once mocked humans, a human who walked away from pride. Sitting side by side, as equals, far away in the stars, news of the human who stood alone began to spread. Some called him a fool. Some called him a hero, but those who met him knew the truth. Jason Carter was the human who stayed, when others walked away. The station Zinar Prime was safe again, thanks to the human who stood alone. But the story of Jason Carter didn't end with the battle. In fact, for Princess Valera, it was only the beginning. Valera found herself thinking about Jason more often. Not because he saved the station, not because he stood against danger, but because of how he did it. Calm, silent, and with no pride. One morning, Valera entered the engine room. Jason was there, fixing a broken cooling system. Valera walked over and stood beside him. Jason didn't look up. "Need something?" he asked softly. Valera smiled slightly. "I want to help." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Help? With engine work?" Valera nodded. "I can learn." Jason thought for a moment, then stepped aside. "All right, hand me that tool." Valera picked it up and gave it to him. They worked together for hours. For the first time, a royal worked beside a human. As an equal as they worked, Valera asked, "Why do you always stay calm? Even when people insult you? Or when you're in danger?" Jason tightened a wire before answering. "'Cause anger makes you weak. Fear makes you blind. But staying calm lets you see clearly." Valera nodded slowly. She felt those words in her heart. Later that day, Valera's brother, Prince Kale, visited the engine room. He stared in shock at the sight of his sister fixing wires with a human. "Valera, what are you doing?" Kale asked sharply. Valera stood straight and said, "Learning something new." Kale frowned. From him, it's just an engineer. Valera looked at Jason, then back at her brother. "He's more than that. And maybe you should see it too." Kale shook his head and walked away, saying nothing. Jason gave Valera a soft look. "That wasn't easy for you." Valera smiled. "It was. Easier than I thought." That night, Valera asked Jason to join her on the observation deck. The stars shone bright across the dark sky. They stood side by side, silent for a while. Then Valera asked, "Did you ever want to be a soldier? A leader?" Jason shook his head. "No, I only wanted to do what's right, in the way I know how." Valera turned to him. "But you lead people. They follow you." Jason gave a soft answer. "Maybe because I never asked them to." Valera smiled. She realized. Jason led by example, not by force. The next morning, a meeting was called. King Varath himself arrived on the station. With him came Zenari nobles, warriors, and commanders. They all wanted to meet the human who saved their station. Jason stood quietly at the side of the hall as the king spoke. "Jason Carter," King Varath said, "you have shown courage and wisdom beyond your years. You have earned the respect of my people." The nobles nodded. Jason gave a simple bow. "I only did what I could." The king smiled. "That's why it matters." Valera stood beside her father, proud of Jason, more than she ever thought possible. After the meeting, Valera walked with Jason in the quiet hallway. She looked at him and asked, "How do you do it? How do you stay true to yourself?" "Even in front of kings and warriors," Jason thought before answering. "Because who I am doesn't change. Just because others are watching." Valera stopped walking. She placed a hand on Jason's arm. "Thank you for changing the way I see humans and myself." Jason met her eyes. "You changed yourself." Valera smiled gently. "But you showed me how." At that moment, Valera felt something deep inside her heart. She didn't know. If it was friendship or something more, she knew it was real, and for once she didn't want to walk away. Later that day, Valera gave a speech to the people of Zinar Prime. She stood before nobles, soldiers, engineers, humans, and Zinari alike. She spoke with a strong, clear voice. I once believed that power came from pride and strength, but today I understand. True power comes from courage, from standing for what's right, and from walking away from pride. Jason Carter showed me that, and I hope we never forget it. The crowd clapped. Jason stood quietly. At the back, watching, he gave a small smile. Then, as always, he turned and walked away. Valera watched him go, but this time she followed. The stars around Zinar Prime were calm again. The enemy was gone. The station was safe. But something had changed. Something bigger than any battle. The Zinari people now looked at humans with new eyes, not as weak outsiders, no, but as brave allies. And it all started with a human who walked away without a word. A great ceremony was held in the royal hall. King Varath stood before a crowd of thousands, Zinari and humans together. Beside him stood Princess Valera, shining in royal armor. Jason Carter stood quietly at the side, dressed in his simple engineer's uniform. The king raised his voice. Today, we honor a man who showed us what it means to be strong, not with weapons, not with words, but with action. The crowd clapped loudly. King Voreth looked at Jason. Jason Carter, we offer you a royal medal and a place among our honored defenders. Everyone turned to Jason. He stepped forward slowly, but instead of taking the medal, he shook his head gently. Thank you, but I'm just a man who did his job. The crowd grew silent. Valera smiled softly. Of course. This was Jason, always humble, always calm. King Voroth chuckled. A true hero speaks with actions, even now. The king placed the medal on a table before Jason. If you ever wish to accept, you'll be waiting. Jason gave a respectful nod. I'll remember. After the ceremony, Valera walked with Jason in the quiet garden of the station. The stars shone. Bright above them, they walked without speaking for a while. Finally, Valera broke the silence. You really won't take the medal? Jason smiled softly. I don't need a medal to remind me of what I did. Valera nodded. You really are different. Jason looked at her gently. So are you. Valera felt her heart beat a little faster. For a moment, she forgot about ranks, crowns, or royal duties. They were just two people. Standing under the stars, Valera stopped walking. She looked at Jason seriously. Jason, when I first met you, I insulted you, called humans weak. Jason met her eyes, I remember. Valera smiled slightly, and you walked away. Why? Gave his usual calm answer, because words only have power. If you give them power? Valera thought for a moment, then said softly, I'm glad you didn't give my words power. Jason nodded. I'm glad you found your own strength. They stood there, looking at each other, two hearts speaking without words. Finally, Valera asked, will you stay on Zinar Prime, or go back to Earth? Jason gave a soft smile. I'll go where I'm needed. Valera smiled too. Maybe you're needed here. Jason didn't answer right away, but the look in his eyes said more than words could. Days turned into weeks. Jason stayed on Zinar Prime, working with both humans and Zinari. Together, they repaired the station, improved the systems, and built trust between the two races. Valera often worked beside Jason, not as a princess, but as a friend. People across the stars spoke of the human who walked away from pride and won hearts instead of battles. One evening, a young Zinari student asked Jason, why did you never fight back when the princess insulted you? Jason smiled softly, because respect is not given with anger. It's earned with action. The student nodded, remembering those words, and so Jason's way of silent courage spread among the people. One night, as the stars glowed bright, Valera met Jason on the observation deck. They stood together. Side by side, Valera looked at him and said, You changed me. And maybe you changed the future of our people." Jason gave a gentle smile. "Maybe we changed each other." Valera felt her heart warm. She reached out her hand. Jason took it. Stood together, not royal and human, not leader and follower, but equals. And in that silent moment, they both knew this was the start of something greater than any medal, title, or story. Across the galaxy, tales were told of Jason Carter, the human who stayed calm in the face of danger, the man who walked away from pride, and the one who earned respect. With quiet courage, but for Jason, it was simple. He was just a man who chose to walk away when others wanted to fight, and chose to stand firm when others wanted to run. As the stars watched over them, Jason and Valera stood side by side, ready to face whatever future waited for them together.